Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the TechWolf podcast, where we interview HR leaders on everything related to workforce intelligence, the use of real-time data and insights on jobs, skills and tasks to help organizations understand, predict and transform their workforce. And today I'm lucky enough to be interviewing Diane Gherson, former IBM CHRO and currently, among others, independent director at our TechWolf board. Welcome, Diane.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
Yeah, delighted to be here too at the redesign conference in person. Super glad to be doing this. And actually, the first question is going to be from the previous guest who I interviewed in this very room, I would say a couple of hours ago. And that's Marianne Herman from Workday. Workday as a customer, also a customer of TechWolf. And she was curious about uniquely human skills. And I'll expand on her question a little bit. So she would love to hear your thoughts on uniquely human skills. Some people call them durable skills, and how we should hire or grow them or develop them in our workforces today, given the transformations that are going on.
So that's a good question. I want to pull back and say, let's not get too hung up on human skills, because we all know we have a vast number of people whose special talents may not be those kind of things, may not be empathetic, but are really strong, technically, really strong scientists or whatever, right? And are we going to stop valuing their skills and just say, no, you need to be empathetic and so forth? Hopefully not. Just because AI is now on the scene, these people have a lot to give to the world, and their mastery of their technical skills are really important to us. There are also some organizational skills that are soft skills, but not necessarily what I would call human skills, that are really important that AI cannot do. Which is, for example, intrinsic knowledge about how things work around here. You pick that up when you're working here, and it's going to be different in every company. What flies in one company doesn't in another, And so that's a human skill that, most people have the ability to pick up on. If they don't, then they're not situationally aware. That's one. I think to be able to put things in context is another unique skill that humans have, and we're going to value it more and more, just as we're going to value that intrinsic knowledge more and more as we start using more and more AI that doesn't have it. So that's a long-winded answer to her question. That's a really good one.
Yeah, fantastic. I'll make sure to get that to her and see how she reacts to that. But we're here in San Francisco at Workday Horizon, and a big topic here is workforce intelligence, is skills, tasks, etc. You've been on a journey with IBM as really one of the earlier adopters of a skill-based way of thinking, of embedding that into HR processes. As an extension of that, we've decided to accept the board level position at TechWolf.
Right.
I'm curious, can you run us a little bit through that initial time at IBM, and then how that trickles down to the technology stack you see today, and how that influenced your decision to accept that position?
Yes, well, sure. I mean, first of all, when I worked with IBM, it was really important to understand what skills we have, and then what are the skills that we're going to need. So we used AI to infer people's skills from their digital profiles, because there's no way any manager was going to have time to go and, validate everyone's skills. That wasn't going to happen for 360,000 employees. But what we did need was a really valid way of picking up on what skills people had and what skills they were developing. And we found people with hidden skills that could move into these new jobs. They'd been learning on their own, or they developed it in other ways. And then we were able to give people personalized training to get people on the path to jobs that were going to be in high demand. Not just in IBM, but in general, right? It was fantastic. I mean, by the time I left in 2020, we had 95% validity from our employees from the process that we were using. But when I talked to my peers, they really wanted to do it, and they didn't have that ability, and we could not commercialize it. It was not commercializable because it was so attuned to IBM. But it was used, we used it for an open marketplace so that people could move in and out of different jobs. We used it for people who wanted to take projects on top of their career jobs. It was fantastic. Jobs were no longer the currency, it was skills. It was what skills do you have, and it really made a difference. I mean, it was really powerful at creating a sense of the future and giving people the motivation to keep learning. So, okay, so I looked and I looked and I found one company that ended up going bankrupt. And, and I didn't find anything that was as good as what we were doing at IBM until I came across TechWealth. And I was delighted when I really took a hard look under the hood, and it was really powerful. And I really liked the approach that your team was making, which was to involve people in it, right? And that's just so important. So I liked your process and I liked your product. And so when I was asked to join the board, I was delighted to do that.
Yeah, fantastic. And we'll talk a bit more about that partnership, because understanding the challenges and stakeholder management and everything around that is very much a part of any skill-based journey. But before we go to that, we talked a bit about the past, the present, but here at the conference, you talked a lot about the future too, and the future role of HR. And you talked about the Frederick Winslow Taylor moment. I just heard you on the keynote explain it very eloquently. I'd love for you to summarize like the key take-home message for people. What should we imagine this is in today's world?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, for those who haven't studied the history of this, Frederick Winslow Taylor was the person who came up with scientific management and gave us the modern assembly line. Before that, we had guilds, and people belonged to trades. They were craftsmen in a certain area. Maybe they were making shoes, as an example. They made the whole shoe, right? From cutting the leather to, to attaching the sole. And they had a sense of pride and agency. They worked in small workshops with a master. There would be journeymen and then apprentices. The apprentices would learn from the others. The journeymen learned different techniques and then set up their own. When they qualified, became masters of their own workshops. So there was pride, there was ownership, there was agency, and there was technical mastery going on, right? And they went to the guild, which was their trade. These lovely halls, if you have one in Ghent, that where they would celebrate together and they would, come up with their standards and that kind of thing. That all disappeared with the assembly line, but it happened slowly. What happened in the first phase was we came into the factory, but they kind of worked the same way. They set their own pace. Everyone did things a little differently, but they got the advantages of better tools because they had a steam engine that were electricity. But productivity stalled. And in fact, they were getting the benefits of the technology. The owners of the factory were not. They were getting more time off. They were getting better tools, but the owner of the factory wasn't getting enough. And there's a parallel. Right now, we're in the work augmentation phase of AI, but we're not seeing a whole lot of productivity improvement. And you're starting to see a lot of consummation on the part of senior management. Well, we need to replace jobs and so forth. So we're moving into what I would call the Frederick Winslow Taylor moment, which is, okay, how are we going to reorganize work? The way he reorganized work, it was machine-paced. There was no room for individualization. It was very standardized. He broke every task into minuscule little movements based on time and motion studies. So instead of making that whole shoe, they were doing a tiny one of the 50 steps involved in making a shoe over and over and over again. Okay, that might seem a little extreme for white-collar work, but look at the new jobs we're creating. Prompt engineer, AI data annotator, AI auditor, AI trainer. These are all jobs serving the technology, just like the assembly line served the technology. The pace was set by the technology. And it took away from their mastery, right, of their craft. Well, we could do the same thing. None of those jobs. Nobody went to journalism school to be an AI annotator, but MSN is replacing journalists with AI, right? Nobody went to get a degree in marketing to be serving up, audits and accuracy checks and AI delivering content, creative content. But that's what, advertising agencies are doing. So we're in a position now to affect where we go forward. We can't just let this runaway train run off the tracks unless we want to end up with an assembly line kind of white-collar work environment, which stripped people of their mastery, stripped people of their agency. We all know that professionals, they will do their jobs differently. Do we want to standardize that with AI and kind of crowd out that creativity and that sense of agency that we all have as professionals? Probably not. Because why? We want to grow them. We don't want truncated career paths. We want to grow them into managers, middle managers, leaders, and they need that. skill. So I think this is a really, really important moment for us, and one there where HR needs to step in and take the lead.
And looking at where we are on that today, you speak with a lot of ambition for HR and a lot of urgency at the same time. But to what extent do you see that realized already today? To what extent is it a reality already?
Yeah, well, I mean, you're seeing some good moves, right? The first one I think that we all clapped at was when Tracy Franklin at Moderna took on both IT and HR, right?
Yeah.
So that was one way of saying, hey, the future is to bring these two together. They got to work together to co-create the future of work. Similarly, at ServiceNow, Jackie Cannon has AI enablement and HR, right? Workday is talking, about a chief work officer.
Yeah.
Prudential, the same thing. So we're starting to see a movement to say we need some leadership here, and it needs to be grounded in principles. It needs to be grounded in understanding not just of what's going to give us short-term productivity gains, but what's a sustainable talent model for us. For example, can we do without entry-level jobs? What's the longer-term impact of that? Where are we going to source our future candidates for middle ranks or management ranks? So these are all HR issues that need to be thought through, because at the end of the day, people create value in companies. It's not just a administrative problem. It's a very important issue that all companies are going to need to deal with.
Yeah. We see many headlines passing by on where the world of work is heading, but it's often tough to differentiate between clickbait or true on the field reports. Asking you, like, for a reality check here, to what extent is the world of work going to the grim place that is often portrayed in media, like you see for entry-level workers, like you see for many other job areas being replaced or layoffs happening? Is it truly that grim? And could you give us like a view of the good, the bad, the ugly you see in the market?
Yeah, well, I mean, we've got to look for data and not just anecdotes. But one important anecdote here is that entry-level jobs, openings for jobs are 50% of what they were in 2019. That's a pretty alarming statistic. And you're seeing the unemployment rate of recent graduates being over 2% higher than the rest of the population here in the U.S. It's not a high number. It's like 2% more than 4%. But it's still, I think, meaningful when you look at the numbers. And that's the kind of thing that we've got to keep ourselves grounded in, is what is really happening out there. But I think that's the first shoe to drop, is entry level. And it's the first issue that HR needs to focus on.
Yeah, all right. And talking skills, data, jobs, tasks, it's often a very operational issue, as in you're working with deep down data, and it's easy for HR leaders to get stuck. I mean, we're here at a conference where there's many HR tech leaders, many VP of people analytics walking around that are this close to their work. Can you talk a little bit about how you used to challenge your direct reports in zooming out and keeping enough perspective and not being too caught up in the details?
Well, I mean, look, you have to start with the business and what the business needs and values. Certainly, what's really changed in the last 20 years is that the value on the balance sheets of most Fortune companies no longer comes from things that you can count that are physical, right? Used to be, it was, the inventory on your shelves, or the oil in the ground, or the manufacturing facilities that you owned. And you could count all those things. Now boards are saying, wait a minute, it's your reputation, it's your innovation, it's your intellectual capital. I mean, all of these things are driving the value on your balance sheets. Can you help me understand where you stand on your talent? And if HR doesn't have a good answer on that, that's a problem, right? So as an example, at IBM, what we did every quarter was talk to the board about, is the caliber of our workforce better or worse than it was last quarter? It was that simple, because it needed to improve to meet the demands of the business. We kept moving into new spaces. We needed to grow those skills, acquire those skills, whatever. And we needed to keep our high performers, let go of our low performers. All of those things make for a higher caliber workforce. And so we had to be able to look at skills to say, okay, we've got the lower level skills in cloud or in AI. We've got the very senior skills, but we're actually really light on the middle group. And so here's what we're doing about that, so that obviously our development capability is going to be affected by that, as an example. What's your turnover rate? Who's taking your people? Where are you hiring people from? These are all board level questions, but they come down to what is the caliber of your workforce? And is it up to the needs of your strategy? And that is the number one issue that I hear over and over again now in boards. So if you don't have a handle on the skills, it doesn't have to be every skill, but it's the critical skills for your business, the highest value skills that you need to have your arms around. There are other reasons to measure all the skills, right? For example, opportunity. If you want to be able to move people around, create mobility, which of course we did at IBM, you need to know all of that. But I'm really just speaking to now, what does the business need? The business needs to understand whether you have the caliber of the workforce that the strategy demands.
Yeah. And it might be now that we're in a situation where for the first time the business need is very much aligned with the HR need, right? Because the overlap couldn't be greater. So going back to your Frederick Winslow Taylor moment, this is it's really the time to bring that all together.
Yeah, AI is moving very fast, as you point out. And the question isn't whether it will reshape work. It's whether we will reshape it or it will reshape us. And that is the really important issue that we're facing. And we need to pull together the framework, the understanding of the principles that we're going to apply in designing work, and look at work as a system, not just a new tool. AI is not just a new tool. It's actually creating a new system. When we brought in industrialization, we brought in the 5-day work week and a 40-hour work week, right? Because that worked for factories. Well, okay, does that still apply in the age of AI when you look at how work will get done with AI? Those are questions that we need to address. And the first company that figures that out is going to win. Let's
not be just AI babysitters.
Right.
You talked about the pace. It's going really fast. You, as someone who keeps close to recent innovations, etc., advising a couple of them too, how do you keep up to date with all of this? Where do you show up to learn digitally or physically? Is there some resources you can point people to? Because it's getting more and more difficult to keep track of what's happening. So.
Right. No, I agree. I think we're all developing our, list of people that we follow, right? In the HR space, I would say David Green by far is the best curator of what's going on in our field. But there are so many more in the AI space that I follow. One of my fellow board members, Dave Kellogg, is phenomenal, right? I think his posts are very, very good around where we're headed with AI. So, I just encourage people to read as much as possible, see who you like, and develop that followership so that you're on top of what they're thinking about, what they're doing, what they're seeing and hearing.
Yeah, fantastic. Last question, and you might know what's coming, is to connect this episode to the next one.
Okay.
Asking my next guest a question on anything you'd like. The guest will likely be Lisa Brockman from Genesis.
Okay.
One of our TechWolf customers. So any question you'd like, it can be about HR, it can be about skills, about workforce intelligence, topics we talked about or beyond. Feel free to unleash your curiosity on the next guest.
Okay, well, I think for her, I really want to understand what are the critical skills in her business and how is she helping senior leadership understand how they're doing? In other words, what's the health of those critical skills?
Okay, let's see how she rolls with that.
Okay.
Thanks. I'll make sure to get the answer to you as well. And thanks a lot for doing this, Diane. I hope we do this again.
This will be fun. Thank you.